Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast with Kiradavis. I, of course, am your host, Kiradavis, and this is a podcast where we take on hot topics every week, hot button issues, and I draw all of your favorite talking points on those issues out to their logical conclusions. Because, as you know, I think that we don't often listen to the things we say closely enough. Sometimes we're not saying what we think we're saying. So this is an exercise in thought and persuasion, and I'm glad you're here with me again today. Today's episode is a mini episode. We're just going to, it's funny, I'm going to call it a mini episode, but I guarantee you when I'm done, it's going to be the length of a regular episode because I got the gift of gab. That's why I do this job for a living. I literally talk and give people my opinion for a living. So, man, this is a great country. So, I want to do some listener responses today because I get so many. Honestly, at this point in my career, I don't think I've gotten ever gotten as much response to anything I've done as I have to this podcast. And one of the things that I find most interesting and flattering is when personal friends tell me that they listen to the show, because when you're in this business, most of the people who know you don't want to spend extra time listening to you, right? Like my husband he's supportive, but he doesn't want to turn on my voice extra times a day. You know, he gets the full on Kiradavis in all her ugly glory 24/7. He does because he'll put on my podcast because he's a supportive husband and a lovely man. But it's not like, I don't think that he's clamoring for the next JL2Y to come out, you know. And I have other friends who are good friends of mine, and their spouses are colleagues of mine. Their spouses are in the business, and they'll say, "Oh, I listen to you. I listen to your podcast all the time." And I'm like, "Really? Because you're in this industry. Most of us don't listen to each other's work just because we're doing our own work all the time." So I find it really interesting that even my friends are willing to listen to my voice more than normal. And of course, I'm getting so much response from new friends out there, all of you new fans. And I just want to read some of those responses and to just take the opportunity to tell you guys how thankful I am for these responses. But here's one from Carrie. I'm not going to use any last names, but Carrie sent me one last month, and she says, "Hello, Kira. I just wanted to thank you for your podcast, Just Listen to Yourself. I enjoy hearing more areas of our political world that I may be less knowledgeable about. I love it when I can learn and agree with you, and I even love it when I learn but don't agree 100% because your message is still so informative, though it's rare that I haven't agreed. I cannot count the times I have recommended your podcast to others, women, men, left, right. I've recommended to everyone who asks me for a good podcast. I'm a working mother who doesn't get the time to do as much research as I want to on each and every issue. The media I can take in on my own is very limited because I share a single TV. And with a 4-year-old and a sports-obsessed husband, I feel you, Carrie. And it mostly comes in podcast form. But I learned that it's hard to find great podcasts that relate to me as a right-leaning middle-class woman with strong Christian values. I get so excited when I see JLTY comes in my queue each week, and I get very grumpy if I am unable to listen that day. My work relates to the oil and gas industry, and I would love to hear your responses to some of the movements people are wanting to make away from fossil fuels. And I would also like to hear more of your thoughts on illegal immigration, especially with regard to the U.S. economy. Please keep doing what you are doing forever. Please." Thank you, Carrie. Carrie, thank you so much for that email. I feel you, girl. Like, this is how I want this podcast to be, because I know that you'll turn on the news, right? You'll turn on the talking heads, the pundits, and they'll be scolding you for being a low information voter, for not being informed. But you know what? Most people in this country just want to go about their daggone business. You know, Carrie's got a husband. Carrie's got a son. Carrie's got a career. She doesn't want to spend her free time watching MSNBC or Fox News or wherever she's going to get that information. And certainly no one has time to read 200 pages of some legalese garbage bill that's being presented in the House on any given day of the week. Like, who has time for all this? And like, I get that. We should not be shaming people for being, quote, uninformed. There used to be a time in this country when most people couldn't even tell you who their national representative was, not because they weren't interested, but because that person had very little effect on their lives. America and our constitutional republic has become so centralized. It's still not as bad as the socialist nations, but worse than the founding fathers meant it to be, that what happens in Washington, D.C. has become oversized. Its influence on our day-to-day lives is outsized. A lot of these issues we argue about, even issues I've covered on this show, should really be dealt with on the state level. School choice is a great one of those. We always talk about the Department of Education and how a lot of people hate that Betsy DeVos is in charge right now. A lot of people don't even know what Betsy DeVos does, but they know Trump appointed her and she wasn't a lifelong government stooge. And so automatically people feel like that's cause for suspicion. But really, we don't even need the Department of Education. How many of you just cringed when I said that? We've been conditioned to think we need these national departments. I don't even think we had an IRS until the 50s. Am I right? Someone correct me. But the IRS didn't always exist. And yet somehow people still paid taxes and the government still ran. Department of Education. What does the Department of Education do? Do you know? Tell me what it does. Tell me. I know you can't really tell me because this isn't a legit conversation. But if you're sitting in your car right now listening, say out loud what it does in a sentence or two. You don't know. How many teachers work at the Department of Education? How many kids do they teach? What kind of curriculum do they use? Nothing. They don't do anything. We don't need them. Education can be run at the state level. So that was a long way around. See, already, this is not a mini-sode. This is not going to be a mini-sode already. Look what you got started, Carrie. Already, though, you know. Anyways, my point is that women like Carrie, moms like Carrie, might not have a lot of time to keep their head in the news. And in fact, I respect that. You shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be this complicated. So it pleases me that I get to maybe break some things down for you in a way that is entertaining and in a way that you can kind of digest and regurgitate in your own words, you know, with your own thoughts, and you'll be more informed. At the very least, you've got a base to work with, right? Because I don't know everything. So clearly what I'm telling you isn't the end all be all of all knowledge. So, but you've got a base to start with on some of these subjects. And so you can go in and have some interesting conversations and maybe some provocative conversations. I don't know if I'll ever get to a full episode on the fossil fuels issue, but I do, as I know Carrie must listen to my show and she's heard me talk about being raised by a hippie environmentalist, and she's still a hippie environmentalist, still love her to death. But I know that when I was a kid, I really thought, you know, fossil fuels were going to end my life and end our lives on planet Earth. But when I got older, and more particularly when I started researching, literally looking into some of the subjects that I had always just accepted talking points on, I really changed my mind about fossil fuels. Fossil fuels was actually one of my first kind of conversion points, if you will, when my politics were beginning to change, because I was also at the same time going through a spiritual reawakening as a new mother, as a new wife, and really kind of delving into what the word had to say about God's provisions for us, which is another reason why I don't get so panicked over the earth, because we should be good stewards, but I don't believe, you know, we didn't make the earth and we can't destroy it. We can do bad things to it, and we do bad things to it. But I'm not worried about, you know, all human life being polluted into a pile of dust in the next 40 years. No, but one of the things that when I was learning about what I believe to be God's intentional purpose of creation, I thought about how perfectly everything lines up, how the earth orbits in such a way that it can support life. And if it were off by even, you know, a millimeter, or, you know, 0.00000% of a millimeter, the earth would be too hot or too cold, or there wouldn't be enough fresh water just the proximity of the moon to the earth that gives us our gravity. That is perfection. We call this argument fine tuning in theological circles and theological debates, the argument for fine tuning. So one day I was reading about fossil fuels, how we get them, how we find them, how we get them out of the earth, and comparing them to ethanol or hydrogen-based power sources, maybe coming up with cars that run on steam or water, stuff like that. And it was kind of a revelation. Maybe a lot of you all have already come to this, but I felt like it was a light bulb that went on in my head. When I looked at how we got oil and what oil did for us, and I looked at water and ethanol. What's ethanol? It's corn. I realized that of these three options for creating energy at this point, the one option that doesn't take anything from anywhere else is oil, right? Fossil fuels. Water you drink. Water we drink. We need water. We'll die without water. Well, what happens when we start using water as an energy source? I live in California where every day some politician tells me we're not guaranteed tomorrow as far as rainfall. We're in a drought. We're always in a drought here. We came out of the drought last year. We're back in a drought. So you've got politicians telling you that water is drying up. We don't have enough water. We're not going to have enough water moving forward. Why would we make water the main resource for energy? Corn, ethanol. Well, that sounds like corn. Okay, that's easy to grow, right? They grow a lot of it in the Midwest. I know, I went to school in Iowa. Corn. Well, corn is a basic food source. The mass production of corn has vastly changed the nutrition of the human race. It has extended the lifespan of the human race. That's because it is the basis for the feed, your cattle feed. It's the basis for a lot of ingredients, for things like sugar. Like, it's the basis for so much. Corn also takes a ton of water to grow. So already you're diverting water sources to grow corn. Then what happens is it skews the market. So you have lots of crops and fields in places like the Midwest that should be used for other, more diverse crops. And that's actually good for the ground even. That's actually good for the earth to diversify your crops and rotate those crops. But corn ends up taking over all of the fields. It ruins the land and it stretches the resource thin. So what we need corn to feed cattle, but if everything turns to working on ethanol, then we're losing, and we already are, this already is happening, we're losing a huge chunk of a vital nutritional resource to the human race, to energy. Okay, so corn is something we use somewhere else. Oil, we don't use it for anything else but creation of energy, of products, right? Some of your products have, petroleum jelly, and plastics are made of oil. But my point is that you don't use oil for anything else. You don't eat oil. You don't drink oil. Oil doesn't cure disease. Do you see what I'm saying? The only purpose for oil is energy. And it's like, it's just been sitting there all these millennia for us to find and use. God is so good. To me, it's amazing. And I don't know why we would kind of dump on that gift. Oh, this is now the way we use oil can be damaging, and we can do better to make our refineries cleaner. But that's all technology. That's all advancement. When you start making people go backwards, you don't have the apparatus to make your technology clean. It's advanced nations that are the clean nations. It's because we don't like living in dirt, right? People will buy more of your products if the products are clean. People want their environments to be clean, so they'll pay for that. Anyways, Carrie, thank you for that topic. I think I just did my fossil fuel show, but I think I do want to do a show on illegal immigration. So I put it on my list, and hopefully sometime in the next couple of months, I'll have the opportunity to get to it. In the meantime, thank you for listening, Carrie. Thank you for taking the time to write, and thank you for taking the time to just stop and listen to yourself. All right, here we go. Here's the heavy hitter. I did the N-word episode, which I was super nervous about. Guys, I had to have a phone call with my producer. I hate talking on the phone. He hates talking on the phone. We don't want to talk on the phone together. But we really had to hammer this out because we had to approach it judiciously, and we didn't want to be salacious about it. And he's a good man. He's a good Christian man too. And he doesn't want his network to be, associated with salaciousness, or because there's a lot of people in the political industry and in the punditry industry who will just be sensational because that's clicks, right? That's views. I call that red meat talk. There's a lot of red meat talk out there. And some of it's fine. Some of it's right. It can be red meat and correct. But there's just a certain way you frame things that's clickbait. And we don't want to be those people. You guys know I wanted to have an intelligent discussion about it. So we had the conversation. We batted it back and forth. He asked his mom, because she is an intelligent woman and an investor. And we all agreed to go forward with it with caution and care. I didn't get canceled because of the episode. So far, it hasn't been booted off any platforms that I know of. And mostly it's been received very well. I haven't actually had any complaints, but a few of you wrote in to give me your comments. So I want to read a couple here. I've got one here from Joanna. Joanna says, I listened to the whole N-word episode. I'm a white girl. I have 3 white boys with my lily white husband. God bless you, Joanna. What do you have to say about our other black kids giving a white 16-year-old boy the N-word pass? In other words, they love each other like brothers and accept him as one of their own. I told my son his mama isn't giving him that pass, so he better not ever say that word around me, and I'd prefer never. But is that rude to his black friends? Also, my son went to the Dominican, and it was literally the substitute word for bro down there. They called each other and my kid N-word on the regular. Any opinions how he should respond to that? Thanks. Signed, White Mama. Joanna, I really liked this letter because you brought up some good points that I don't think I really had time to elaborate on in the last podcast, because there is something called a hood pass. In fact, my producer and I were talking about that earlier. He's got some white friends. He's given a hood pass too. I don't have any hood passes. I'm not cool enough to have a hood pass for any of you all. But I think you bring up a point, Joanna, that is very valuable to think about. And it's probably not as cut and dry as some people, including myself, would like to think. That is, can anyone use that word if they're given permission by black people? And I hear you also about the Dominican and how it's a substitute word. It's the same in the hood. A lot of people will just use it like it doesn't have any meaning behind it. It's just a greeting. It's just an expression. It literally means nothing but hey you. So I totally get that as well. But you look at guys like Eminem, who grew up in black culture, who grew up in the rap game and basically exclusively in a black community. What about guys like that? What about guys like your son who have brothers like that? So my producer and I actually talked about this quite a bit. And I said, my opinion on the issue is that a hood pass is fine. If your son is with his friends and this is what they do and this is how they talk to each other and they have an understanding, then that's their private business. So I wouldn't necessarily be offended if I walked by them and they're standing in a group and I heard your son address one of his buddies like that. The way I explained it in the N-word episode was standing behind that Asian kid, right? Who answered his phone like, what up, N-word? I don't want to say it anymore because I don't want to push my luck. But, I didn't take it offensively. I knew that it was a greeting. And so I do think that your son and his friends are fine. However, your son needs to know as he gets older that his friends don't speak for all black people. So he's going to go out into the world, and I've seen white guys do this. So please warn him to be careful. I've seen white guys do this, and most white people do this just because they kind of think of the black community as a monolith, that we all have the same experience and the same opinions. No, like as my producer Darvia and I were talking, some black people will not allow you to utter this word at all in any context. That's just the way it is. So he needs to know that when he goes out into the world, that hood pass doesn't extend to general society. He's going to have to get a new one from every black person he meets, or he just needs to keep it to himself and use it privately. But he just needs to know that, there could be consequences, and not every black person is going to think like his black friends. As far as you're concerned, Joanna, in your house and the way you let them talk in your house, I consider it a cuss word, and I wouldn't let my kids cuss around me. And when my kids bring their friends into this house and someone uses the name Jesus Christ as a cuss word, I will holler at them so quick. My son gets so embarrassed. Most of his friends swear they're atheists, but they're also teenagers and they're going to live forever and they already know everything. And so he's so embarrassed. But if I hear someone say Jesus Christ as a cuss word, I will be like, no, we don't use that. We don't take the Lord's name in vain in this house. So it's perfectly fine for you to say, look, we don't speak like this in my house. You use that language with each other privately or out of doors. But, there's nothing wrong with saying that. And you can say that for anything. Again, you can say that for taking the Lord's name in vain. Maybe you don't let them use the F word. Maybe you don't let them call girls certain names or refer to women as certain things. That's totally up to you. That's fine. If you're comfortable with it too, that's fine too. It's your home. Do whatever you want. But just let your son know that wherever he goes, that hood pass doesn't necessarily extend to it. And as far as being in the Dominican, where that's kind of a local colloquialism, I would still say better safe than sorry. When someone greets your son like that, he can greet that person back with the American equivalent, bro, dude, whatever. I would just say don't risk it, especially if you're in a foreign country and you don't know who's going to go off on you or what help you're going to need and where the help's going to come from. Just be aware that the way you relate to your good friends is not how every black person is going to relate to you. But thank you so much, Joanna, for this email. Thank you for your listening and your response. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I would tell your son as he moves forward in his life, just take some time and stop and listen to yourself, right? Thanks, Joanna. And finally, we've got one from Warren. Warren says, hey, I really want my I Survived JLTY episode 22 sticker, please. That was the N-word episode. And I did say at the end, if you made it all the way to the end, you deserve some kind of prize or award. I don't have a sticker to give you yet, Warren, but I am giving you this shout out. Congratulations. You made it through the N-word episode. We all made it together. Thank God. Thank God. Warren says, Kira, you are the bomb. I started listening to you after you showed up on the Babylon Bee, and my wife and I are both big fans. And then he sent me a link to a PragerU video. Hey, I'd be very interested to hear your response to the upcoming PragerU video. And he sent me a link, and it's a short film that they're producing called Fleeing California. So when that comes out, I'll check it out and see. I'm sure, Warren, that they're going to say all the things that I say on this show all the time about California and what's driving people out, particularly now. And I'll be interested to see if they update their video with any of this, but particularly now, I think that this AB5, which I've been raging about for months now, is going to flip this state in a way we haven't seen before. So a lot of people are already leaving because they can't stay because their jobs are now gone thanks to this gig economy killer law. So there's a lot of people that are just leaving because of that. There's just no way to conduct business. And then there's other people who are like, well, I'm not a Republican and I hate Donald Trump, but I can't depend on any of these Democrat lawmakers that I voted in, and I've literally lost my job. I mean, today I was just reading an article about Santa Claus. We have literally canceled Christmas here in California. Because obviously Santa Claus performers are contractors, right? You only need Santa at one point for about a month out of the year. That's it. So you have a lot of guys that make a lot, like half or more of their yearly income playing Santa Claus. Well, because of this independent contractor law, they are no longer able to be contracted as Santas. So now Santa Claus is illegal in the state of California. Lorena Gonzalez and her cronies in Sacramento are literally the Grinches who stole Christmas. Can you believe it? And that about wraps up what we have this week for listener responses. I want to thank everybody who took the time to listen to episode 22, the N-word episode. I just wasn't sure how it was going to go over. It's such a sensitive topic that some people just don't even want to address it. And I find race to be that way typically. And Warren mentioned that he heard me on the Babylon Bee podcast. And I think if he's heard me on there, by the way, Warren, I was supposed to be on there this week, but I ended up doing Super Tuesday coverage over at KEBC Radio in Los Angeles instead, because they pay. And the Babylon Bee is just a guest spot. But I love the guys from the Bee. I hope they'll have me back soon. But I just, I got a family too. So, but I'll be back on. I love going on with the Bee guys. But I think if you heard me on that podcast, you probably heard me talk about how I don't think America's ready for an honest race discussion, because it does take both parties. And when I say both parties, I think at this point I just mean black and white. And maybe there's other race discussions to be had, but I can only speak to the black and white race discussion, to be fully honest. And I just think it takes both parties being able to sit down at the table and give up their right to be offended. And I think there's too few people who are willing to do that. Everyone wants to start with the but, even if their but is justified, by the way, even if it's justified. I think too many people want to start with that but, and our big butts get in the way. So I think we're not there yet. So Warren probably has heard me say that, but one of the things I try to do on this show is to be brutally honest. And that N-word episode was just brutally honest. So it does my heart good to know that you guys were open-minded enough to listen. And I didn't get many idiot responses, one or two, but mostly people were engaged, thoughtful, and really had good questions. Solid, honest, kind-hearted questions that came from a place of kindness and intentionality. And I really appreciate that. So somebody asked me why I chose this network to put this podcast on. And I said it was because I wanted to build a new audience outside of the audience that I've been building for the last decade through my punditry work, my work as a pundit and commentator. And JLTY has given me that opportunity. I have met so many new and interesting people from all over the country because of this podcast and heard from so many of you. It's my pleasure. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all your responses. If you have a response to any of my episodes, you can go ahead and email it to me at kiradavis422. That's the numbers 422 at gmail.com. Yes, it's a convoluted email. Yes, I will get my own JLTY email here shortly. I'm finishing up setting up my Patreon so that y'all can support and get extras on the side. You can get your bonus content and all that good stuff. I got some prizes to give away. I'm setting that up right now. So we'll have some email and extra ways for you to communicate with me as well, including some personal phone calls. You want to get on the phone with me? You're curious? Want to know what I think? You want some unsolicited advice from me? You can join that Patreon level, and we can connect voice to voice on the phone. So we're going to have all kinds of fun stuff on that Patreon. And I promise I'll get you a legit email address. But until then, you can email me at kiradavis422 at gmail.com, or go ahead and follow me on Twitter at realkiradavis. And if you type in Real Kira Davis into Facebook, it'll bring you to my public page there as well. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for tuning in and sharing this podcast. Hey, if you get a chance, would you leave me a review and rate this podcast? Helps a lot. Until we talk again, just remember, every once in a while, take some time to stop and just listen to yourself.